If you live in Charleston or Georgetown counties and you own a home, you most likely received a letter in the mail from the county assessor's office. Chances are you've been reassessed. On this Money Monday, here to help us better understand the tax intricacies is Thomas Spade, CPA at large and instructor of accounting at the College of Charleston. It's good to see you, my friend.
It's great to see you as usual, Leyla. How are you?
Two dreaded words that can only mean one thing: property reassessment.
That's right.
You owe more money.
Yeah, that's exactly right. They reassess properties every 5 years. Every county does it on a slightly different 5-year schedule, but they recalculate what your house is worth, which means that you're going to pay more tax on your house.
Why Charleston and Georgetown County in particular?
Well, Charleston and Georgetown County reassess every 5 years, like 2015, 2020, so on, so on, so on. Berkeley County and Dorchester and Colleton County do 2014, 2019, 2024. So every county is just a little bit different.
Okay, so you get reassessed every 5 years, but what if you just bought a house?
Well, if you just bought a house, they reassess at that time. So if you just buy a house, the county will reassess the property, and they know what it's worth because they know how much you paid for it.
Right. But if you bought the house, let's say a year ago, and you get reassessed, so you're still on that 5-year time clock that has nothing to do with the fact that you just bought the home a year ago and have only lived in it for a year.
Well, it depends on when you bought the house. If you bought the house in 2019, then they're going to assess it based on that 2019 value. Now, if you bought it before 2019, you're going to get reassessed this year.
I see. Okay. Now, we get reassessed every 5 years. How does that compare to other states around the country?
Many other states actually reassess on an annual basis. Mm-hmm. So with us being on a 5-year schedule, it gives people a little bit more consistency for every 5 years. But then pretty much everywhere else in the country almost, they reassess on an annual basis. So people up north, for example, their property taxes go up every single year.
Well, let's talk about what a reassessment is exactly. So you sell a house, you buy a house, they know what it's worth because of what you paid for it. Right. When they do, after you've lived in the house and then they reassess in that 5-year time frame or whatever it may be, how do they figure those numbers?
Well, what they do is based on comparable sales. They look at particular neighborhoods, they look at particular towns and cities, they look at the market, they look at what other homes have sold for. They consider that, they consider the square footage of your house, the condition of your house, and all of that is taken into consideration when the county comes up with their assessment of what they think your house is worth.
And if you're new to this whole thing called property ownership, and you get one of these notices in the mail, there's some numbers on there. First of all, a reassessment notice is not the bill.
It's not the bill. In fact, at the top of the notice, it says, usually in caps and in very large letters, this is not a bill. So this is just what they're saying. This is what we think your house is worth. Now, you do have a right to appeal that, but you have to have a very good reason, not just, I don't think it's worth this. You have to have a very good reason to dispute what the county says that your house is worth.
And I want to get into the caveats of that. So we're going to do that in just a little bit. But first, let's talk about those numbers I had mentioned. So you get this reassessment notice, not the bill, but a notice. And there's a bunch of numbers on that page. There's market value, there's taxable value, there's a ratio, an assessment, and et cetera, et cetera. I want you to help us understand what each of those terms means.
Okay, the market value is what they think your house is worth. The assessed value is what is what they are charging you tax on. Now, the assessed value might be slightly different than the market value, mainly because they can only reassess your property when they do the reassessment every 5 years. The maximum increase is only 15%, and that 15% cap does carry forward from year to year to year.
Okay, so let me just stop you right there. Okay, so market value is what they think your home is worth. The taxable value, That's the 15%.
Yeah, that's that 15%.
That's that 15%. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's where those two numbers, and that's why they kind of look a little bit differently. All right, this is where I need to take a break. So when we come back, we're going to continue based off of the taxable value, what that assessment is, and there's a few other numbers that we need to know about.
We'll be back. Very important ones, yeah.
After this. Welcome back on this Money Monday. We have welcomed back our good friend Thomas Spade. He is a CPA in Charleston. He's a fantastic instructor, one of the favorites on the campus of College of Charleston, and he's one of our favorites here on Fox 24 News Now. We've been talking about property reassessment, and we were just kind of going through some of the numbers. If you've received a reassessment notice on your property in recent days or weeks, this means that the counties of Charleston and Georgetown in our viewing area have been reassessed. It happens every 5 years, but we're just going through some of the numbers on the page. Market value, taxable value. So we deemed what those two things were. Then they figure what the assessed value is, and there's a little calculation there. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, the assessed value is their starting point that they use to calculate the tax. Now, the assessed value, sometimes called the appraised value, is essentially going to be that number we were just talking about with that 15% cap. Now, you take that, and that's multiplied by the ratio. Now, the ratio is the most important, I think, number in this whole calculation. If it's your principal residence, it's 4%. If it's not your principal residence or it's commercial, then it's 6%. Now, to get the 4% treatment, you have to actually apply to the county. You've got to send them things like copies of South Carolina tax returns in some cases. You've got to send them your driver's license, your voter registration, your vehicle registration, all showing that address as your address. And then and only then will they give you that 4% assessed ratio. Now,
and every percentage makes a difference.
Every percentage makes a difference.
Okay, so once you get the assessed value, that's a large-ish number.
Right.
But then how do you calculate what you are projected to owe in terms of taxes? There's something in there that I've never heard before, a term. Maybe you can clarify what that is.
And that would be millage. Okay, so where the millage comes into play is they first take that assessed value or the appraised value, and that's multiplied by that ratio, that 4% or 6%. That gives you what's called the assessment. Now, the assessment is then multiplied by this millage number. Now, the millage is a decimal. Now, the decimal is determined by where you live and what services are provided by the county or the city where you live, like the schools, maybe some sidewalks, maybe there's a rec center, whatever. Either way, the millage is then multiplied by that assessment, and that gives us our total tax before considering any property tax exemptions.
Okay.
And there are some exemptions.
Let's talk about those.
If it's your principal residence, you get some property. You could get some property tax relief from the state against the school board portion of the millage. Also, there's city and county relief as well, and that's only for your principal residence. Now, where does that come from? That's technically called the local option credit, and the local option credit comes from if the county has a local option sales tax. Now, Charleston County, for example, tax rate's 9%. One of those 9% actually stays in the county for property tax relief. So in other words, if you're renting your house in Charleston County, hate to tell you, but every time you buy something, you're going to pay a little bit towards the property taxes owned by the people on South Battery who own their houses as their principal residence.
Ouch.
So, yeah, I know, but it's what the voters approved back in 2005, because a downside to this reassessment every 5 years is that when property values are increasing substantially, then what happens is people get shocked, people get caught off guard. Property values pretty much doubled between 2000 and 2005.
We only have a few seconds left. I also want to get to one more exemption. I'll just mention it here real quick, and that's the homestead exemption. So if you either have a permanent disability, blindness, if you are 65 and older, you should apply for the homestead exemption. That could knock off a few dollars off of your tax bill. That's also really important. The caveat, though, of appealing your tax assessment would be that they come in and they say, wait a second, we made a mistake. Your property is worth more than what we estimated, and then you end up having to owe more. Well, I want to drive everybody to our YouTube channel because I'm going to enter Thomas Spade's classroom, and he is going to teach us, just in theory, how to calculate your property tax reassessment. So I'm looking forward to doing that with you, Thomas.
Yay.
And I want to thank you so much for joining us.